Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue to bring you a video about the story of Hoài Ca and Hùng. Under the familiar chill of the year's final days, the atmosphere of the traditional Lunar New Year has quietly spread throughout Hoài Ca's small home. It is not loud or showy, but slowly seeps into every breath, every moment of daily life. The cold does not make people retreat inward. Instead, it makes the activities inside the house feel warmer, as if the moment one steps across the threshold, all the worries of the outside world are gently left behind. In the small kitchen, the flickering firelight casts shadows on the old walls, creating a space that feels both familiar and intimate. Every corner of the kitchen, every simple utensil, carries the feeling of preparing for Tet, from the pots darkened by years of use to the bamboo baskets of ingredients neatly placed in one corner. Nothing is new or elaborate, yet it is precisely this simplicity that evokes a unique sense of warmth, a feeling found only in rural kitchens when Tet is drawing near. Hoài Ca stands quietly by the stove, her hands skillfully stirring each batch of preserves. She carefully makes coconut jam, winter melon jam, and cooks sugarcane syrup, each step carried out slowly and attentively, as if every movement holds a sense of respect. These dishes are familiar, nothing unusual for countryside families, yet they contain the flavors of memories from many past New Years. The sweetness of coconut, the light freshness of winter melon, and the rich aroma of sugarcane syrup blend together, filling the house and making the presence of Tet more vivid than ever. For Hoài Ca, making everything by hand is not simply about saving money or ensuring food safety for the holiday. It is also her way of preserving things long familiar, habits that may seem small, but are deeply tied to childhood, family memories, and the images of past Tet celebrations she once lived through. With each stir of the jam, each careful adjustment of the fire, old New Year seasons seemed to return to her mind, times when the kitchen was just as warm, and loved ones gathered together in simple laughter. The preparation for Tet unfolds quietly, without reminders or elaborate plans. Tasks flow naturally from one to another, as if they are an inseparable part of Hoài Ca's year-end rhythm. Each finished batch of jam is neatly arranged, each jar of syrup carefully sealed, all carrying patience and thoughtfulness. In the chill of the days before Tet, this meticulous care warms the small house not only with firelight, but with a growing sense of fullness and contentment. In this space, Tet is no longer a distant concept or merely a date on the calendar. It is clearly present in every lingering aroma, in every neatly arranged item, in every moment Hoài Ca calmly prepares things with her own hands. It is a simple, quiet Tet, yet rich in depth, a connection between the present and the past, between what is happening now and what once was. And within this quietness, the rhythm of the year's end continues to flow gently. No rush, no disruption. Everything seems to be finding its own place. Hoài Ca's small home, with its warm kitchen and slowly completed Tet treats, becomes a peaceful anchor amid the chilly final days of the year. In this atmosphere, Tet is not only approaching, it already feels vividly present in every ordinary moment of life. While the kitchen was still filled with the rich aroma of sugar gently boiling on the stove, the scent of freshly grated coconut blending with winter melon and lingering sugarcane syrup in the air, a neighboring elder slowly stopped by, carrying a bundle of fresh green dong leaves just picked. The leaves still held the coolness of morning dew, their surfaces cool to the touch, their vibrant green seeming to carry with them the breath of the earth and sky at year's end. That simple gesture alone was enough to make the small house feel warmer, as if Tet arrived not only through the dishes being prepared, but also through the natural, unspoken sharing between familiar neighbors. Hoài Ca smiled softly as she accepted the bundle, without the need for polite formalities. The neighbor placed the dong leaves on the old wooden table, his gaze briefly sweeping across the familiar kitchen before resting on the pots of jam still being stirred. No one was in a hurry, no one rushed. Every movement was slow and unforced, just enough to fully take in the quiet atmosphere of the year's closing days. At that moment, the small kitchen was no longer merely a place for cooking, but a meeting point for everyday stories, simple, familiar, and close to the heart. The two sat down by the fire, close enough to hear the crackling of burning wood and feel the warmth spreading. The conversation began gently, revolving around the coming Tet, who would wrap on which day, how crowded the market would be in the final days of the year. The words were plain, unembellished, the kind of stories repeated every year, yet each telling still carried its own unique feeling. From Tet preparations, the conversation slowly shifted to children and to life after a year full of changes. The neighbor spoke of how quickly the children were growing, how they would soon be adults, while Hoài Ca listened more than she spoke. When it was her turn, she shared just enough, no complaints, no lengthy explanations, no avoidance either. Her words were simple and unhurried, reflecting exactly the rhythm of the life she was living, not loud, not filled with distant expectations, but steady enough to keep moving forward. The talk then turned again to shopping for Tet, to managing expenses wisely, to keeping the holiday warm without making it burdensome. Hoài Ca spoke calmly, with no hint of showing off or exaggeration. In every sentence, there was only the maturity of a woman accustomed to handling things on her own, to carefully planning and calculating for her family. She did not speak directly of hardships, yet anyone listening could sense the caution and careful consideration behind each decision. When the conversation reached plans for after Tet, Hoài Ca's voice remained composed. She did not paint grand visions, nor did she speak of the future with certainty. Those plans were mentioned as open spaces, needing more time, better conditions, and patience. It was not hesitation, but the thoughtful mindset of someone used to weighing things carefully, never letting fleeting emotions lead the way. Throughout the conversation, Hoài Ca maintained a calm and balanced demeanor, no comparisons, no competition. She listened attentively, responded just enough, and allowed the conversation to flow naturally. Her maturity did not come from eloquent words, but from the way she viewed life, shaped by years of lived experience. It was the maturity of a woman accustomed to quietly tending to things, taking responsibility for her choices, and always placing long-term stability above short-lived joys. Outside, the chill of the year's final days continued to slip through the cracks, but inside the small kitchen, the warmth of the fire, the lingering scent of jam, and that simple conversation eased the cold away. The presence of Tet became clearer, not through noise or excitement, but through the gentle bond between familiar people. In that moment, the kitchen was no longer just a living space. It became a place that held everyday stories, quiet thoughts, and unspoken hopes for the road ahead. When Hung and Little Duc returned, the once quiet house suddenly felt fuller with the familiar sound of footsteps and the warmth of togetherness. As soon as the door closed behind them, the atmosphere shifted. The slow, gentle stillness of the earlier Tet preparations gave way to a clearer rhythm of life, one with movement, with the presence of people who had long been connected to this place. The soft slap of sandals on the floor, the faint rustle of jackets, such ordinary sounds, yet enough to make the house feel noticeably closer and warmer. Duc stepped inside, still a little shy, his eyes wandering as if carefully examining every familiar yet unfamiliar corner. This house was not entirely strange to him, but not yet close enough to make him feel at ease right away. Each of his steps was slow and cautious, as if he were afraid of disturbing something fragile lingering in the air. Hung walked just behind him, his gaze following every movement of his son, partly to reassure the child, partly to remind himself to be more patient in this delicate moment. The first meeting between Duc and his grandmother unfolded in a silence that was hard to name. There were no cheerful greetings, no affectionate gestures like one might imagine in a reunion. She stood still, her eyes resting on the child longer than usual, as if trying to memorize every detail of his still youthful face. Duc looked back at her, his gaze a mix of curiosity and hesitation, as though trying to understand the connection between himself and the woman standing before him. The distance between them was small in physical terms, yet clearly present in emotion. It was the hesitation of people who did not know where to begin, the awkwardness of facing parts of the past that no one spoke aloud. The grandmother did not step forward too quickly, nor did she turn away. She simply stood there, letting time slow down for a few brief seconds, heavy with thought. Duc did not rush either, his hand gently gripping the hem of his shirt, his eyes lowering at times, then lifting again, as if searching for a sign of safety. Within that silence, many emotions coexisted and overlapped. There was the quiet remorse of the adults, born of what had already happened, of decisions and circumstances beyond their power to change. There was the caution of a child, sensitive to unfamiliar and uncertain things, always needing time to feel his way through. And beneath it all lay a shared, unspoken desire to be understood, to be accepted, to let everything unfold naturally, without pressure or haste. Hung stood quietly to one side, not interrupting, not urging anyone on. He understood that some moments could not be arranged or explained with words. His presence only needed to be close enough, calm enough, for both the grandmother and Duc to feel that they were not alone in their awkwardness. He believed that this silence, though it felt heavy, was a necessary beginning, a pause that allowed each person to face their own emotions. No one spoke to break the stillness. The house seemed to slow down, leaving only the steady ticking of the wall clock, a reminder that time was still moving forward. And it would be time itself, not hurried words or actions, that would gradually soften the invisible distances. This initial silence, if met with patience, would become the foundation for closeness later on. In that moment, there was no judgment, no demand for immediate intimacy. There were only people standing before one another, each carrying their own emotions and thoughts, sharing the same space. The wish for forgiveness and acceptance was never spoken aloud, yet it was clearly there, quietly waiting for time to respond. And in the house, slowly warming with reunion, the silence was no longer an emptiness. It became a place that held hope for what would come next, slow but enduring. This year's tete meal, therefore, was not defined solely by the familiar aromas of candied treats, green dung leaves, or freshly rinsed glutinous rice, still clinging with moisture. It was also filled with very real, very human emotions of a family slowly learning, day by day, how to draw closer to one another. Those scents blended within the small house, drifting through every corner of the kitchen and each room, evoking a feeling that was both familiar and new, as if Tet arrived not just in form, but through the quiet movements within each person's heart. The atmosphere of this year's Tet carried a different tone. It was not overly bustling nor entirely joyful, but more subdued, deeper. In every moment of togetherness, one could sense the pauses that existed alongside anticipation. Those pauses did not make the atmosphere heavy. Instead, they gave each gesture and each glance greater meaning. The Tet meal, with dishes laid out on the table, was not only meant to satisfy hunger, but also served as a reason for everyone to sit together, to be present in the same space, at the same moment. Amid the fragrance of candied treats and the soft crackle of fire in the kitchen, Emotions that had been held inside for an entire year seemed to find room to breathe a little more freely. Not everything was spoken aloud, not every feeling clearly expressed, but simply being there together was already a step forward. There were gazes that lingered a little longer than usual, gentle nods in place of questions, and cautious yet sincere smiles. All of it formed a Tet picture that was not perfect, but deeply real. This family, during this Tet, did not try to hide the distances that still existed. Instead, they accepted that closeness takes time, that some things cannot be rushed. Worries were still there, plans for the future were not yet fully clear, and unspoken thoughts still quietly rested in each person's heart. Yet it was precisely this acceptance that made the atmosphere lighter, because no one had to force themselves to appear perfect during the holiday. In that context, Tet appeared as a quiet but steady anchor. It was a rare time that allowed people to slow down, free from the pull of everyday routines. A time to sit still, to look back on what had passed, to face existing distances honestly, without rushing to judge. In those days, silence no longer meant avoidance, but became a space where emotions could settle and thoughts could be gently rearranged. Within the small house, where the scent of Tet still lingered, each person carried a private wish, yet all shared the same hope, to be a little closer, even if only by a small step. There was no need for grand promises or clear-cut commitments, only a presence that was steady and patient enough. Tet thus became a time to nurture hope, that through sincerity in how they treated one another and patience in how they listened, even the hardest gaps to bridge would gradually narrow. The days of Tet passed neither too quickly nor too slowly, just enough for everyone to realize that connection does not come from dramatic moments, but from small things accumulated over time. A shared meal, an unavoided glance, a silence that no longer felt heavy, all were signs that change was taking place, quietly yet persistently. And in that space, amid the aromas of candied treats, dong leaves, and fresh glutinous rice, Tet was no longer merely a familiar holiday. It became a place for this family to begin again, slowly and carefully. A place where people learned to look at one another with greater understanding, letting go of old prejudices. A place where hope was not spoken too loudly, yet remained clear enough for everyone to believe that as long as sincerity and patience were preserved, no matter how long it took, the remaining distances would eventually be filled, naturally and enduringly. Please continue watching the upcoming videos to follow the next developments of the story, where what has been quietly unfolding inside that small house will keep extending along the natural flow of life. Emotions left unfinished, pauses yet to be named, and even the seemingly small details that carry weight over time will gradually become clearer in the moments that follow. There will be no rush, no sudden twists. The story will move forward in its own gentle rhythm, allowing each character to reveal their changes in the most honest way. There, every glance and every familiar gesture will take on new layers of meaning as they are shaped by the passage of time. Relationships learning to grow closer will not be resolved through words overnight, but through steady presence, through ordinary moments repeated long enough for distance to slowly soften. Each passing day, though subtle, leaves traces that may not be immediately visible, yet quietly shape real change. The next videos will continue to hold on to this spirit, unhurried, unembellished, letting the story open itself through the simple details of everyday life. Familiar tasks, brief conversations, and wordless silences will become the threads that connect each segment, forming a continuous flow that is slow but certain. Viewers will have more time to observe, to feel, and to understand the unspoken thoughts behind the calm surfaces of each character. The story, therefore, does not end with what has already happened. It continues to be written through the character's own patience. Emotions once held back, unspoken wishes, and quiet worries will appear naturally, without force. Each following part will serve as a piece of the puzzle, linking past and present, making the overall picture more complete while preserving its authenticity. This journey does not promise perfection, but it opens a space wide enough for people to make mistakes, to move slowly, and to change in their own way. As viewers keep watching, they will not only witness the story's progression, but may also find reflections of themselves in these very ordinary, very familiar moments. Because sometimes, stories do not need dramatic climaxes to touch the heart. They only need to let things unfold as they truly are. So please continue accompanying us in the next videos to follow these small yet enduring movements. The story is still there, not yet concluded, and each upcoming episode will be another connected step, unhurried but seamless, bringing viewers closer to the quiet changes taking place beneath the familiar sense of calm.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người, lại là mình đây. Hôm nay thì mình mang tới video của Hoài Ca nha mọi người. Video của Hoài Ca hôm nay thì kể về việc Đức, con trai riêng của Hùng, đang tìm hiệu ứng cho video. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều vì đã theo dõi và ủng hộ cho video của mình nhé. Tạm biệt mọi người, hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo.